Hello, are we live?
We
are live. Hello, everybody. At least I think we're live.
Hi, say hi if you can hear us, please.
So we just had connection problems, so I just want to, streaming problems, so I just want to make sure people can hear me. Hello, everybody. Michael, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm rather frustrated today, but we'll get into that in a bit.
Let's just check if people can hear us. Can people hear us?
Hopefully so.
I can't see how many viewers we have, so it might just be you. Well, can you hear us, Michael?
I'm just going to turn it up. I had it muted. Hopefully so.
Here is a Roderick. Hello, Roderick.
Yeah. How are you this evening? Yes, I can hear us, so fantastic. I think we're good.
So let's try that again. Hello, everybody. How is everyone? Michael, how are you today?
Oh, I'm actually quite good. I've learnt a absolute ton today about topology, especially related to characters. But more on that later.
So yeah, we are today going to be talking about our next big projecty thing, and our next big projecty thing is a
action RPG.
Action RPG. We're launching a series of courses, a bundle of courses. And it's going to be very much like we're doing at the Blender course, and I'll break that down in a minute. But we are gearing up towards launching a big Kickstarter for it. Michael, why do we want to do a Kickstarter?
Well, this project has the potential of massive scope creep. So we want to absolutely hammer down what it is we're doing. It's still going to be quite big. We haven't nailed down absolutely everything yet in terms of what individual courses there will be as part of it, what asset packs will be part of it. So there's lots going on at the moment, and we do want to pick your brains this evening and see what you actually think about it as well.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the kind of big project that's going to take a few months of like sitting down and making sure we have everything like properly prototyped before we start recording. Yes. And if we're going to be taking 2 to 3 months of not doing any recording, we want to make sure we, have the money to eat. So Kickstarter, that allows us to get a chunk of money from people who say, yes, we're ready for this big project, and then we'll go with it. So that's the plan.
And of course, anybody who backs us has the benefit of getting the courses a lot cheaper than you'd get when they're launched. Especially, we were talking earlier on about how we might structure it, and we're certainly thinking about giving people the option of basically pick and mix from the courses. So if you want the entire bundle, you can get that, including asset packs. Or if you were only interested in the art side or the coding side or just the asset packs, there'll be pick and mix basically as you go. So you can pick your tier.
Or maybe you just want, how to do a controller and the character and just get the basic action RPG stuff down. So I'm going to show the very, very, very basic prototype-y. This is us playing around in a sandbox. And before I do, this is not the character we're using. This is a placeholder character. We're using GD Quest mannequin character. These aren't final assets. This is hot code, expect bugs, etc. But if I bring this
there were bugs moments before the stream.
There were bugs seconds before the stream. Okay, so
I think a second and a moment.
This is all going to be very familiar. We have this lovely little thing here. It's probably going to look laggy over Discord because that's the way it goes. OBS doesn't really like me doing this, so expect some lag. Mikey, is it looking smooth on your end?
It's looking about 15 frames per second, but it's absolutely
it's
fine.
Looking about 60 on mine, but So we have this lovely little system, and we can go down here into our little dungeon, which might be a little bit easier on the old machine. We'll find out.
Well, this was one of the bugs. Let's hope we fixed it.
Yeah, we fixed it. Okay.
Hey.
So the idea is we want to make a third-person action RPG. We want dodge mechanics. We want live aiming. We don't want pause. We want physics. I recently fixed a big bug with the physics. We want an inventory system. At the moment, you can't pick up nearby items because I haven't put that code in. But you can drop them.
And pick them up.
We also want No, can't pick them up yet. I just said that.
Oh. Yeah. But we can drop them.
We can drop them. I mean, I can see they're there. But I'm going to put some stuff in chests. We're going to put equipment in. Mikey's been playing with characters, and the idea is eventually we're going to have, I don't know why I did that. We're going to have the ability to put on different armor and different weapons and shoes and hats and things. And so, that's our idea. We've got this very, very ambitious title in our head. And rather than say, let's spend 2-3 years making an indie game, let's make this a series of courses. And as a basic idea of the kind of structure we're talking about, it's going to be go into a series of dungeons, get a bunch of loot, get more powerful, possibly upgrade a town, although that's moving into stretch goal territory.
Yes,
you can go inside the lava pits.
No, but you wouldn't want to.
I haven't yet coded any death in there, and the lava pit is too deep to get out of, so you just get stuck in lava, but you can do it. There's a bunch of little things I've had to fix, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But as a basic idea, I want to not have any levels. So all your power will come from the loot you find. So we want some sort of...
And by levels, we don't mean as in a world that you can explore. We literally mean like in typical RPGs, you can be level 1, 2, 3, 4. We found that's kind of an artificial construct and often a limitation as well. It's silly that you can't pick up a sword that looks like the other sword because you're one strength point too low.
I've spoken about this a lot, but the one that really got to me was Cyberpunk, where you can't wear these pants, you don't have enough street cred.
Yeah.
Right, but they're pants. Let me buy the pants. Here's some money. You're not cool enough. I know, I'm a middle-aged man, but give me the pants. So the idea is, if you are a character that can use a certain weapon, and we want to put classes in here, and possibly races, although we have some ideas of how to make that work. So, for instance, if you're a magic user, you use a staff, so you'll get better and better staffs, but you won't get more and more powerful and so on. It's all going to be down to your skill and what loot you find. So maybe staffs will have different effects, light attacks, heavy attacks. We're thinking two-handed weapons and dual-wield weapons. What we're not thinking of is shields, because we want to keep you moving, not turtling. So the sort of Bloodborne idea.
Yes. I mean, I've played quite a few RPGs now, just experimenting what is possible, what kind of mechanics we like. Yeah. And the whole idea behind turn-based stuff where you're not really doing anything, it's more of a roll of a dice in the background, essentially what's going on, and you're at the mercy sometimes of a random number generator. A classic example might be XCOM, where you've got a 99% chance of hitting, but your sniper keeps missing. You're like, And
to be honest, I love those games, but there's already a fair amount of tutorials out there for making those kinds of games. Not in 3D, admittedly, although Bass was working on. Yeah. But this is something much more visceral, much faster paced. Okay, so some questions, some very good questions from Rayus. Sounds interesting, looking forward to it. Okay, so that's not a question, but I wanted to read it. When are you guys planning to release the Kickstarter? So our internal deadline for launching the Kickstarter is the first week of August. But that is subject to change. That's what we are aiming for. However, to get to that point, we need to have a bunch of systems ready a couple of weeks before then, because we need people to know this thing is coming before we press the button. Otherwise, we're going to spend 2 weeks just trying to get people to find the page. Yeah.
We've learned a lot from Mag Racer. We stupidly did not kind of preempt people, and we've been showing off this RPG now for a couple of maybe a month or so. And it's kind of been a little bit of a pet project, and then it started growing and growing, very much like Gotta Getaway did, which is a good sign. It means that we're both really interested in it, and we've realised there's a lot of space. This will be a 3D game as well. It won't be a 2D RPG. As you can see, it's a 3D game, and we've got a series of options in terms of what we can do, and I'll go with what I've got written down here for a moment. So one of the big ones that we found incredibly useful is producing a couple of asset packs. That may be a couple. It may literally be a couple. It may be 10 different asset packs. We don't know yet. We don't know how we're going to separate those out. But one of the good things about that is being able to just drag and drop into Godot. We're going to make sure that all of these assets work in the Godot game engine, rather
like
than
the
have
dungeon
to
pack,
faff
right?
around.
So if you guys were
Like
with us a couple of months back when we released our dungeon asset pack, it's optimized for Godot in the sense that you just put it in and it will just work. All the origins in the right place, the grid map is ready to go, the rigid bodies are good. So that's the plan. So just to make it drag and drop.
Or courses wise, under my umbrella, I've been deep diving at the moment into characters and different various ways of creating character. You can do polymodeling, you can do sculpting, and then retopology, and all of these things are kind of one and the same, but they're just different approaches. And sometimes one makes far more sense for a low poly model right out of the gate. But if you want to coin a phrase, bake detail down from a high poly mesh into a low one, so you get that high quality look on a low quality mesh, you need to actually do all the work. So there's a certain pipeline there you need to follow through. We've also got things like building and buildings, nature and environment, etc., that we want to look at. And I've been toying with the potential of another music course. Obviously, this time focused on RPG style music, whatever that happens to be. We may probably
Dubstep
go
grindcore.
Yes, that's the one. I was going to say medieval. I don't know what came over me.
We could do medieval as long as we can have wobs.
Wop wop wop.
There's also, I mean, we're going to need some, loot, weapons, armor, clothing, general things you can pick up and sell, because we want to have a basic market in town.
So we've got a great.
We got.
I was going to say we got a great question here about procedural.
As was segueing to.
Yeah, nice. I'm glad we.
So at the base level, weapons are going to have a procedural element to them, right? So you're going to get randomized loot. At the moment, our thinking is the core offering is a tailored thing. So you manually make these little dungeons, and there's a set route you go through. However, we have a plan for a stretch goal to turn it into a roguelite. So the dungeons will be procedurally generated, which causes a whole bunch of extra issues, especially with navigation and AI. Because at the moment, in Godot 3, you cannot bake navigation at runtime. You have to do it in engine. Now, there is a plugin that can deal with that, but I've not managed to get it working yet, so I'm going to keep playing with that. There's other systems we could do. We could make our own A-star and all the rest of it. If we go that route, we also want procedure-generated characters. So when your character dies, you'll get one of 3 characters you can pick. And you don't get to pick, what they look like or what their class is. You're just like, this one, this one, or this one. This one might be a skeleton, this one's a human, this one's a goblin, whatever it is. And if we're going that route, we want to have it so that you're going into these dungeons, picking up loot to upgrade the town you're in, which is going to allow things like a blacksmith to make better weapons, a potion merchant, a bard to write better songs. I just made that one up. You're welcome, Mikey.
That's okay. I can write the background music. You can code it in.
I do like medieval. Actually, I mean, medieval is a really large period of history. We're talking like 600 years of history there. At the moment, I've been using music from an RPG pack I got for free from Game Dev Market, which is working great for the shots we have. But I don't think we have the rights to give that away from a course, and you don't learn anything about making the music. So if we can do something around that style, that is much more about us, maybe with some toucans in it, it'll go that way.
Definitely. One of the things that I think would be really good for this style of RPG, even though it's an action RPG, that it's important that we kind of have areas of lull, whether that's in when you're probably back at town, or if we put like an exploration, maybe some fields, a woodland, whatever it happens to be. We need some chill music. We need some ambient music that's always there in the background. That maybe even again, it's early days, but maybe even a bit dynamic about it. And this has just come to me. We were speaking to a team down in London about music production, and we haven't reached out to them yet, but they may be interested in focusing down on this launch, which would be amazing.
I mean, they might be interested in focusing down on this launch and on doing the sound effects, because that's going to be a big one. Because I can't remember who said it, but I heard a quote. It was someone who is famous for making video game trailers, and he says that sound affects is how your players feel the game, and that really does something to it. Like there's a lot we can do there.
It's been a while since I played Apex Legends, but one of the first things when I picked up that game that I liked about it was the sound. The weapons felt like they have substance, and it's a weird thing, you know. As you're saying, it's a feeling, but it's it's something that a lot of people forget. You know, you just drag shoot sound onto a trigger, and then when you pull that, you play that sound.
Especially when you're making like very little simple projects, it's easy to go get like 8-bit sounds from an 8-bit generator or from Kenny, just plug them in and you're done. But most of the time that doesn't really work. That doesn't give you the world you need.
And it's one of those things that if you go that little 10% more than every other person, if you're developing a game, your game will stand out amongst a sea of samey games, because maybe they're using free assets, maybe they're using free sounds, etc. And rightly so. If you're building up a game from scratch, it's great to use those free assets, but always be mindful that you may want to replace them at a later point with something that's better suited to your game, more stylized to your game, or just better.
And again, general. This is all very in planning. Like, we're not committing to making any specific, music course or asset course at the moment. We're still trying to get feels of what people want and how much work it'll be and how big a scope this is going to be.
Yes.
We've got a lot of ambitious stuff we want to put in. I don't know that this one is a core, but I'd like to put in some systemic gameplay. By that I mean things like, primarily I'm talking about environmental effects. So creating a node called flammable. And then if something is flammable and is hit by fire, it will start burning. It'll start losing health. There'll be a particle and a shader effect. Anything nearby gets fire damage, and they're doing the same with electricity, and doing the same with ice, and doing the same with whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Again, that's quite a big step up. So before we do that, we need to know that there's enough interest in the course before we actually, work on those systems.
We got a really rough. I think we tweeted it out last week. In fact, a really rough.
Dodger.
Yeah, the one with the jammy dodger. Yes, but we've got a rough idea about the layers that we want to do. Almost like not a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced. It's not like that. It's more like a core and then extra things that really expand the game. We have decided on a couple of things. And one of them is no multiplayer. We want this to be a single-player experience, mainly because of the complexities of trying to do all of this, and how on earth do you get the data to a server or another player?
It's such a big leap in what you're doing. I mean, it's a quantitative, not even quantitative, it's an exponential difficulty spike. And if you guys haven't taken our Canopy Cars course, it's not just a simple... Gotta Get Away course. It's not just as simple as how do I get multiple controllers and move the players. Every piece of information has to be sent somehow. And who's responsible for that? With that? Who has the authority? What priorities do we have? What happens if a packet gets dropped? So in an attack, you can't drop the packet. Right, we need to all know at the same time, but that's going to slow your game down. So there's so much going on with multiplayer, and then keeping that secure. And likewise, we're not going to be doing let's bring this to Steam, because while that is a useful thing to know, just getting the workshop license and getting it onto Steam is last I checked $100. And then on top of that, you need to download the Steam API, and that's quite a specialized step. And frankly, if you're ready to start putting your game on Steam, I think you're ready to take the extra step yourself. Like, I don't think it's worth us going through all that extra work for like 1% of our student base. Unless a bunch of people throw thousands of dollars at us and say, but you have to make Steam, in which case I guess we're making Steam. But
that we can put that as like a super stretch goal or something like that.
I'd rather not even do that, to be honest, because over-promising an RPG sounds like a really bad idea. Like, this is a big, complicated project.
Yes, that's the primary thing. We wrote down all of these components, as you would, maybe courses. Not quite sure if they would be individual courses or whether they'd be merged together. But when we put them all down on the table, we realised that we probably have missed a ton as well, but there was a lot on there. And the first thing we did is just prune it. Like, what are we not doing? And we realized that we didn't want to be bogged down with basically multiplayer as intermediate. So the moment that goes through, it's going to be a lot harder. And delivering the game at the end, at the moment, you could distribute it on itch.io very, very easily by just packing the game and compiling it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can easily distribute the game. It's more specifically getting the Steam API working is a whole other thing. You'd have to recompile the engine. So you have to recompile Godot to work with a Steam hook, which I've never done.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't played with it. And it's just too much scope creep. And there's a bunch of other things we don't want. Like, we don't want player levels. We don't want turn-based combat. We want this to feel live and fast and exhilarating, I guess is what I'm looking for. We want you to feel incredibly competent. We want the badass feeling of dodging out of the way of Skeleton's axe and then running in with your sword and then backflipping out the way. As I'm saying these things, Mikey's having a tiny panic attack because I'm just adding more and more animations, but you know.
Well, that's one of the things when it comes to your usual RPGs. You're always like, you start off really noddy, and you become powerful.
Which is an expression that won't make sense to people who didn't grow up in Britain in the 70s and 80s. Mickey Mouse. You
feel really
Mickey
weak.
Mouse.
You start off incompetent, weak, and have no skill, and that's kind of, you could do that easily. You could just tweak all of your stats down to 0 if you wanted to, make your movement slower, and you can tweak those things anyway. That's relatively easy because you're just changing variables. So we're going to start off with a competent character, and we're going to take it from there. It's going to be all about the fight, the loot, and as Yann was saying, probably building up a town, something along those lines, where once you built up your blacksmith, you can get better equipment, or you build a witch's hut and you get potions, whatever it happens to be.
And there's a lot of cool systems I've been playing with. I don't have the fun things to show you yet, partly because we're waiting on the characters to get some of them, and partly because I'm still exploring them. So on the first one, Ragdoll, I'd really like to get Ragdoll working, so when you kill something, it should go ragdolly for a bit.
We had a great discussion the other day where I was like, so if I make the character fall to their knees and then switch to ragdoll, that's going to be much better than just when you kill the character, they immediately go ragdoll, which is funny, but not the look we're going for.
Any bosses? Probably.
Yes. When I was thinking about how to do the characters themselves, I thought, and again, this is up in the air at the moment, but starting with a simple character and getting more complex, and one of the projects within that course is probably going to be a boss. Whether or not that ends up being a mage or an orc or whatever, we haven't quite finalized that yet, but it'll be a big strolling monster of sorts. That actually brings us back to,
well, hang on, there's other things that I'm exploring that I'm really excited to talk about, even though I don't have to show yet. I've been exploring behavior trees and what we can do with AI.
Yes.
At the moment, I'm looking at a behavior tree plugin that I found, which is really good, but potentially writing your own behavior tree from scratch, because it's a well understood mathematical model. But there's so much you can do with it if you get it just right. Like if you really understand it, which I'm still doing at the minute. I've been trying to get the inventory to keep working. I literally just managed to get, you can see potions on the ground or nearby working seconds before the stream. Like, we are actively working on this. But with behavior trees, there's so much we can do, and then we can start having NPC classes behaving in different ways. So, for example, if we get to the point where we're adding a whole bunch of fire effects, if you are close to fire, start panicking. Unless you're a berserker, in which case, get more angry. Right? So there's all kinds of stuff we can do with behavior trees, which I think are really interesting.
That would be phenomenal.
And that's a course within itself, right? Within this whole bundle of courses. That's setting up behavior trees. It doesn't really matter if you're doing 2D or 3D. Any game that's going to be using behavior trees is going to have that in there, whether it's a management a life simulator or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things where I think we've learned from our past courses is making sure that people can jump in with the bit they want. Because it always seems silly to me, but going for a large course and only wanting a slither of it.
Yeah.
by all means, if there's a bundle there which takes you through the entire process, that's awesome. But also, if you just want to learn, as Yann was saying about behavior trees, that is.
Well, it reminds me,
you go
there's
for the
somebody
behavior trees,
who's
cool.
taking Godot Getaway on Udemy, and he keeps complaining that it doesn't work as a first-person shooter. And I understand where he's coming from, because he wants to make a first-person shooter game in Godot, and there aren't any tutorials for that. So he took this, but that's not what we made. So if he's just looking for specifically the networking, we should have just released that as an individual course within the bundle.
Exactly. Yeah. That would make a lot of sense, and then people can take that and apply it to their own game. And ultimately, when we've got a myriad of these type of courses, perhaps we can start doing a sort of a course where we put things together. So now you've completed this, why don't you take our challenge pack? And that what I'm really going off on a tangent here. So no, wind it back.
Challenge pack. That's new.
On the note of bosses, so one of the things we were talking about a few months ago
is the my pillar guy who stands around pillars. No,
no, not him. So one of the things with animations is we want to make these characters quite modular. So we want to be able to make multiple hero characters or NPCs, but you can't just apply the same animation to everything, because the moment you got a big towering boss, their gait is completely different to someone who's small and nimble. And even someone who's small and nimble versus someone who's big and strong, they'll have a different feel to them. So that's something I want to go through when it comes to the animation part of these characters. And animation is challenging at best. It can be highly frustrating as well at points as well,
and very time consuming. Like, this is not.
I'm going to say figure of eights, and you'll find out more in the course.
Yeah, animation is not for the faint of heart. Like, getting a character to feel right. We were looking at different character ideas, because Mikey's been playing around getting the character and sort of learning a lot, saying, well, not this, and learning a lot. So we're looking at, like, what's the highest level detail and lowest level detail we want. And we realize we can get away with quite low detail if the animations have a lot of life in them.
Yeah. You could get away with my iconic Cube Dude from Cube Dude Kickabout. As long as you've got good animations. Was it So there's a Disney book called Something of Life. I can't remember the full
isn't
title.
It the Principles of Animation?
No, that's something separate.
They have more than one book.
Oh yeah.
I don't approve of that at all.
I will find it. At some point. But yeah, when it comes to animating, it's fun. And starting off in this particular book that I'll find out in a second when Yann starts talking about something else. But if you get the animation right, you can make a pillow look enticing.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing. And that's just a very, very simple object. If you can convey emotion through a simple object, more complex objects are a lot easier to handle.
So I kind of want to show off something that I figured out last week that I was really proud of. So I'm going to bring this over here, and it's all going to be very jerky. But right here, we have this lovely character. And this character is a kinematic body, right? So there's my kinematic body. And kinematic bodies are a type of physics body, but they don't have any physics properties that you might consider. So they don't have inertia, they don't have, you have to code that in yourself. So the problem here is that this means kinematic bodies, by definition, have infinite inertia. So if you walk into anything, it goes flying off. And I managed to fix that. So these barrels are still too light, but what was happening before is I'd go down into the dungeon area, and I'd jump on the table, and it would immediately clip through the floor. And it was very frustrating. So I've had to code in a workaround. And I'm really proud of this. And like, this table no longer clips through the wall. Jumping on it no longer breaks the table. Jumping on the barrels might make them fly off to the corner, but they won't, clip. What I've had to do here, if I just close that, is in my character. Is it my character? Oh, right. This is the GD Quest character. So in their state machine, while we're moving, I've had to put in this piece of code. And I've put in a export variable for mass, which is up top here. I've put an export variable for mass, so the player has a mass. And now what we're saying is when you're doing move and slide, once you've got that, get all the things you're hitting in your move and slide. And then if it's a rigid body, I want you to apply the impulse from where I am, multiplied by mass. And at some point, I'm going to multiply that by how fast you're moving, so that you're not always hitting it at full speed. So if you're hitting a table, it's going to slow you down, which means you're not going to keep pushing it forever and ever and ever. But it's little things like that that make such a big difference, because the alternative is to make your player a rigid body, which vastly changes how it controls. Back to Mikey.
So the book that you were talking about, that I was talking about, is The Illusion of Life, Disney animation, which
the question that people have here, hi Ezra, it's not that the game is slow. On my machine, it's running at 60 frames a second. It's OBS doesn't like me streaming and running Godot, or running that game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to upgrade my machine before we get to the course, because reasons. If you look at our channel for the test videos we've done, you can see it's running fine.
Yeah.
But in this situation where I am streaming it and Discord to YouTube, it's yeah. Also, YouTube is telling me it's not receiving enough video.
I would ignore that. You're fine on my end here. It always lies to me. It's like what matters is the OBS thing down there. So the just for the technical minded out there, I believe you have an i5.
Yep.
And a 1060. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to streaming, that chews up a lot of those resources anyway in order to stream, and so the stream ends up being a bit jerky.
Yep.
But that's just that.
But to give you an idea of how this actually looks on my machine, let me share this video. 1 second. Okay. So I posted this earlier in the week. This is how it's running on my machine.
Open it in a new tab, otherwise you'll lose the stream.
Well, hopefully you guys can see and hear this.
Oh, okay. You're playing it. Oh, clever. Forgot you could do that with OBS. Yeah, it looks nice and smooth, yeah.
Yeah, so we have 60 frames a second here. It's just when I'm trying to stream it, it doesn't like it. Which we're going to have to fix the recording, because I'm using OBS to record anyway.
Perfect. No, that's nice. I love the fact that we've now got to the point where we can drop stuff. We're about to approach the point where we can pick it up again.
Well, we can now drop stuff and detect items that can be picked up and get the correct icon for them. And only if you're in range. So all of those things are great. The next thing is picking things up, which is not too difficult, and then handling the drag and drop interface, which is a little trickier because it turns out item lists don't like that, but I can probably find a way around that. And then it's on to AI.
Figuring out what is going to attack what within certain ranges.
Well, first I just want to get basic behavior trees and navigation working, but yeah.
Patrol routes for guards or orcs or goblins, or
I mean, suspicion levels. There's a whole bunch we can do here, right? I mean, it's really, once we have the fundamentals nailed down, it's really modular and expandable. And that's one of the things I like about behavior trees, is it's so expandable. There's other things we could do, like we could do the goal-oriented thingy, but I don't think goal-oriented AI is really where we want to be going with this. I think it's going to be much more about, is this happening? If so, do X, then Y, then Z, and keep going along that tree until you can't. And if not, do something else, do something else, do something else. Behavior trees are a really nice modular way of handling things.
Yeah. It's funny that, isn't it? There's a key point that comes back to being able to really expand your base, and that's by having some sort of modularity, whether it's putting assets together, whether it's putting levels together, whether it's putting code together.
And one of the things I've really been pondering over the past week is how we're going to handle the items in the items database. Right now, all items are a resource in Godot. So I create a resource file and I drag in the things to the export variables that we need. So it has an icon, I drag in the icon. It has a tooltip, I write in the tooltip.
Yeah.
All of that's fine. Or we can have an external database, a JSON, a CSV, something like that, a config file, doesn't really matter what it is, a castle DB, and we can import that. Which of those two is better? And there's actually arguments for and against both, and at the moment
Yeah.
I am leaning more towards a resource of resources, so a single item database that has a bunch of resources in it with all their parameters, mostly so that you have that interface in Godot that you can use. However, I can see the arguments for having it all external and on a spreadsheet and just playing that way. The other thing is I can embed things like scripts or icons or sound effects or whatever else we need directly into the resource database, so into the resource file. So if it's in Godot as an item resource object, I can put them all in there and it's just easy. So pros and cons.
And of course, there's no reason why both can't exist in the same game as well. So when we're talking about items, etc., that might be one thing, but then some generic level settings might be better placed.
Oh, there will be things like config files, like you want to save the player's sound and graphics preferences. Like you really don't want to go in and disable shadows every time you're playing.
No, that'd be a bit much.
What else can we tell you? Mikey, do you want to talk about characters?
No, I've already done that. But I would like...
Have you? You haven't?
Yeah.
You talked about what you want to make. You haven't talked about what you've discovered.
Well, I'll get onto that in a moment, because it's a great time to ask if you guys have any questions or feature requests, because...
We're not doing multiplayer.
We're not doing multiplayer. But if you've got any suggestions, we can talk about it here on stream, trying to work something out, and who knows, it might feature in the game. So character-wise, one of the two things I've been playing with at the moment is both making a sculpt of a model and doing poly modeling. So poly modeling is really an older way of doing things, and often people try and focus these days on the sculpting of assets, because you can be more artistic about it. When you're dealing with poly modeling, you're trying to both do form and kind of put the polygons in the right place. So you're kind of doing two things at the same time. However, if you're just working on a low poly model, then sculpting it first is not really the thing you do. However, what you can do is use the sculpting tools to push and pull your mesh around in a much more dynamic way than you perhaps would when it comes to the sky.
The sky?
Yeah. So there's just lovely clouds on the stream.
Oh, hang on a minute. I fixed it.
Sorry, that pressed the wrong button. Yeah. So yeah, there's loads of different approaches, and it's really weird because you get such a variety of styles as well. So there's a certain low poly style that still captures the essence of proper edge loop. So if you look at a person's face, there's oh look, I've got a nice edge loop running around my mouth here because it's coloured in with my beard. And then you've obviously got one going around the entire face. You've got some going around the eyes. You've got one with the jawline coming up around the ears, etc. So there's lots of loops around the face, and you can actually get a very low poly model that still has the majority of those loops in. And the benefit from that standpoint is you can actually expand it and go high poly very, very easily. However, you've also got the other style where you can mash primitives into one another and have a very, very basic style. You know, a cube head, cube ears, cube nose, Minecraft.
I mean, one thing we've noticed is, because you started with quite high poly with the idea of reducing the poly count, and that's actually harder than the other way around. Because when you start destroying information in the model, it's really hard to get Blender to destroy the bits you want to destroy, not the other bits.
Yes, so one of my experiments that I went through, this is why I said kind of, or yes and no, is because if you start from a high poly model and you think that Decimate's going to be your friend, it's probably not going to be your friend. Or it's going to give you a style that perhaps you don't want to roll with.
Right.
So that's the issue there. The only option really, if you've gone high poly and you didn't start from a base mesh that's suitable, is to literally go and
manually.
go and remake your mesh, which can be fine. It's kind of part of the workflow, and there are some tools within Blender that can really help out with that particular workflow. But I don't think there are any free ones. I'm pretty sure there are a couple of paid ones which are phenomenal, but still,
So
it's one of those things. It's something I will suggest, but it's not something that would be necessary in order to take any courses.
And honestly, I think a strong visual style and a visual language is more important than a high poly count. Like, our asset packs are not high poly, but they feel real. We have some interesting questions and comments. One of them is nice hat. Thank you. This is my teaching hat. I used to like teaching undergrads with this one. Crafting and resource gathering is always a fun one to add. We do have crafting on deck. I don't know that it's a core feature. Because there's a lot of things we need to talk about. We'd like to get crafting, upgrading, and salvaging in there. So you could choose, am I going to sell this? Am I going to salvage this? Resource gathering, maybe. I mean, at some point we need to decide if we're going to be Minecraft, because if we're chopping down trees, now my trees have to be destroyable. And that's a whole different thing, right? That's not a small add-on. Multiplayer.
Let's do this with the mesh. That's when it's cut down, just go and clip through the plane.
Yeah, but I then have to handle that as, tracking what's happening with each tree. Multiplayer is a pain. It is a pain. Multiplayer is... You have to start with, I'm making a multiplayer game, and everything else comes from that. You cannot add this in halfway through the project, because it changes so many things that effectively you have to throw your original game out the window. So we're leaving multiplayer out.
Yes.
Green dragons and flying, both doable. Six-legged rhinoceroses. Good luck animating that, Mikey. A rideable toucan. We don't yet have the idea of mounting mounts. Also, I'm a bit worried that Final Fantasy fans are going to accuse me of stealing chocobos. But otherwise, sure. Modability. It depends on how much of a mod you're talking about. If we're talking about adding in an NPC style or an armor piece, that actually isn't as difficult as it sounds if we build it modularly.
That'll do.
We can have all the base information of the game and then have a user directory where they can drop in things in the right format. And if it fits that format, it can be added to the game. That is doable. It does kind of depend on the style of the game itself. What we wouldn't be able to do easily is do things like add in AI types. Like, maybe we could. That's quite a big deal. Like, if we're talking like, can you mod it like you can Divinity Original Sin? No. I mean, it's possible to do that, but that is such a big project. At that point, we might as well be making a game. Like, making a whole indie game. Because getting that right is going to take months.
Yes. There's always this fine line that we end up treading with our courses, because we end up accidentally almost going through the process of making a game. But there's a fine line, because when you're making a game, there are usually, and it's the same with assets, there's usually a repetitive nature to it that doesn't suit courses. That suits, it does suit courses in a way. You'd say, okay, pause the video now and go and make 50 of these things, because that's what you do in the game. But that's not a fun
learning environment.
But that's not great for learning. It's like, go and challenge yourself by making extra models, and then we're going to learn some new techniques.
I mean, there's stuff like that where we're going to be using some of, maybe all of, the dungeon pack that we made, right? And I need to change some of the things in the potions for them to work in inventory system. I don't know that it's worth me showing you, here's how I changed one potion, now go and change every prop. As opposed to, okay, here's the file download this, and it'll have those changes in, or make them yourself. There is value for saying you have to do this yourself and get used to it. I don't know there's value in saying you have to do it 50 times.
Definitely not. The thing when it comes to repetitive nature is part of a lot of workflows. Unfortunately, sometimes there's no shortcut to getting things done, and it is unfortunate. But ultimately, that's what makes it challenging and why we want to teach it as well, because of those challenges.
I mean, there's little things like the way I've got the asset pack sorted out, designed. It's a mesh with a rigid body with a collision. And that's great until you want to drop things, because the mesh doesn't want to drop. So the collision just stays in the mesh. So I had to go in and reparent it. That's fine, and we could probably go through the pack and re-upload it that way. But I don't think it's worth doing it 50 times.
No.
What is nice about this resource system, though, is it's so easy to, like, if you have the icon, which is actually the slow part of this, if you have the icon, you could just make a new resource, drop it in, type in the tooltip information you want, point it to the scene file, then go to the scene, drop in a node called isItem, and then just link the path to the resource file. You have to link the path, not the resource itself, otherwise you get cyclical loading, which is not a good thing. It's a bit like there's a man holding the universe in a sack, but he's in the universe, yes, which he's holding in the sack. Mm-hmm. So he's holding himself in the sack, holding himself in the sack, yeah.
Yeah, I've not heard that analogy before. So often when we're actually producing a game, we end up with I don't know if there's a better name for it, but the cul-de-sac problem, where you're trying something out, you end up at a cul-de-sac, you end up kind of stuck and have to come back again and then go off in a different direction. And that's always an interesting thing when it comes to teaching it, because sometimes those are incredibly valuable, and often if we are going to take you down a cul-de-sac, it'll only be for one lecture before we come back out again and go down another way, because we wanted to show you perhaps how to undo those changes, or just get out of a problem if you've got yourself into one. But it can be challenging as well, because we have had students in the past say, oh, we expect everything to be perfect because it's a course and it's recorded, so there shouldn't be any issues ever. But as long as there's a learning from that cul-de-sac, I think we're okay with.
I mean, sometimes you need to learn what the mistakes you don't see coming are, right? You need to know. Yeah. I mean, we had a great example in Godot Getaway, where we're sending the transform information for each car over the network. And it works great. And then we put a ball in, and we're just going to kick the ball around and make a very, very, very cheap Rocket League. And it doesn't work because the ball only moves when the host moves it. But in order to understand why that's happening, you kind of have to make the mistake first and then go back and understand how inheritance and extending works in Godot. And the fact that transform and physics are not the same thing.
No, and as what there's a better analogy than you need to learn that things are hot by burning yourself occasionally. Hopefully, it's never that severe that you need to go to hospital because you made a coding problem. But
now, Azrael, I'm actually enjoying Mikey say cul-de-sac because French is my first language, and in French, cul-de-sac means arse of the bag, or bag end, if you will.
It's a wonderful way that we use French words to try and make somewhere sound a bit more important. Yep. Well, it happened. Well, talking about, is it medieval times that things
pub,
like pub, things like cow got renamed. There's a posh version of cow and there's a non-posh version of cow.
Oh, that's because of the Normans who spoke French until the 14th century. Yeah, the 14th century. Or 15th. No, 14th century. The official language of England was French, and the peasants spoke English, which was this weird pidgin mishmash of different languages, and the nobles spoke French until the Battle of Agincourt, where the king went, okay, English is now the common language, the French people. And then suddenly English gets standardized. But as a result, there's a rich word for beef, which is veal, which is the French word veau, and then there's a German word, an Anglo-Saxon word. And you get that with drink and beverage, and there's a whole bunch of other words.
Yeah. And cul-de-sac.
Cul-de-sac. That was a nice little detour around the bag.
Are we taking a drink every time? Yes. Yes. No.
Chug.
Drink responsibly.
So in my head, I'm seeing lots of leaping around, managing stamina, leaping in and out of attack range, dodging NPC spells. We want to make it so that if you have access to a class, NPCs have access to a class. And that also is also going to help with the animation. So if there's a, two-handed sword animation that you use, the NPCs will use the same one.
Yeah.
In terms of making the hits work, it's actually quite easy. You just put a collision shape on the end of the weapon where the damage happens. And then you enable it at the beginning of the attack animation, disable it at the end. So anything that's in the path that can take damage, including other NPCs, when the skeleton swings the sword, is going to take damage.
Ah, dear. That's one of my favorite pastimes, getting a skeleton to shoot a zombie in Minecraft and then just watching the battle go on. So we might even put hostile, if your NPC becomes hostile to another NPC.
Good too. I mean, there's no reason why we can't have a rage potion that you can throw.
And we can call it Goddo Brawl or something. I don't know.
We do have to come up with a name of this. Now,
Yes.
I'm thinking the Goddo action role-playing game, which unfortunately does shorten to GARP.
Garp. Unless our main character goes around going Garp.
Gorp. Gorp.
That
Can we make him a
starts
frog?
to remind me of Trapdoor now.
Can we make him a frog? Gorp.
Garp.
Gorp.
Garp. Maybe.
So what do we want as for when the Kickstarter launches?
That's fine. I understood it.
When the Kickstarter launches, we want a vertical slice of gameplay that we can show, like, here's how it's going to look, right? We don't want the full prototype yet because it's still very much shaped by what people want. But we're thinking 3 weapon styles, a handful of weapon models, a few very simple NPC/PC races, a few items that we can that we can wear. Well done, Ezrael. We want to get an idea of this is how it'll feel to play, right? This is what your journey will look like. Then we want to start populating the Kickstarter page before it's ready to go live, so people have a thing to bookmark and share. I could say all kinds of voices. Don't you open that trap door, 'cause there's something down there. If you didn't grow up in Britain, you probably don't know about Trapdoor, which is a shame because it was a great claymation.
Yeah, I loved it as a child. It had quite a bit of adult comedy in it, I seem to remember.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So there's a lot we want to do with this, and it's very ambitious, and we're trying to keep an eye on scope creep, but it's us, and it keeps happening. But yeah, I want to get roughly 2 weeks before we launch something that can be bookmarked and shared to get the word out, because if we're going to be spending 3, 4, 5, 6 months getting this right before we release anything, we need to make sure we can eat.
Yeah, that helps. I don't know if you've ever tried coding on an empty stomach. It doesn't work out. It never works out well.
No. I had a polite debate with someone on Facebook who has a habit of linking to where you can download courses illegally and download books illegally. And I'm like, please stop doing that. Money is too tight for me to watch people give away my stuff for free. But what if they're in a country where they don't use PayPal? Well, 1, he isn't. And 2, they should probably contact us and we'll see what we can do. Just don't upload it to a pirate site and share it.
I was a fly on the wall during that conversation. I was like, oh. It's weird, but yeah, ultimately, it's stealing, essentially.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to spend that many months making something and then put it onto, what you think is a fair price and just, get by on money. It's just got to hustle. And what do you mean it's available for free?
It's a very challenging space. I mean, one of the things that we often end up doing is updating our courses, which means that if we enable something like downloads, which obviously enables piracy very easily because you just share the download. But that's not the primary reason we don't actually enable that sort of functionality. The main reason is that if we need to update or correct errors in the course, then the learning journey can end up being broken for someone who's downloaded something and not for others. In fact, I've had the experience both sides, because I take courses myself, as everybody should always do, and some of these creators have released their courses on Gumroad.
Yeah,
which means you go into it and you download, and then they make an amendment. But it's, where does the amendment sit? Because maybe the numbering system doesn't make any sense. You just can't order it and then just overwrite something. Or if you do need to overwrite something, do you need to download the whole course? You know, it gets very confusing. And that's one of the reasons we love Teachable, the fact we can just drop in a new explanation lecture if there's been a common misunderstanding, or even just upload a whole new video if there is a fault with it.
And that does bring us on to the Udemy question. Is this going to be available on Udemy? And we haven't discussed this internally. My feeling, and this is subject to change, is probably not. Udemy has been good to us, but we lose so much to Udemy's cuts. Like, it's quite... Okay,
so a bit of inside knowledge here. I've been dealing with bookkeepers for the past week or so, just organizing accounts and all the boring stuff that's on the back end. And part of that, they just wanted to know how the breakdowns happen with various instructors and with Teachable and Udemy. And they had asked the question twice when it came to Udemy. They're like, you receive how much from a $15 sale or a 50, and it can unfortunately be worse with Udemy because of the way that they can sell courses with the localization, so that someone might be buying the
localization, coupons, and app stores. So Apple and Google take a big cut. And I've had situations where somebody has paid, the price that's listed as a sale price, but because they've used a coupon and because they've gone through the App Store, I've made 50 cents. Which, I mean, I'm glad I've got the course out, and you get enough courses out there and it adds up, but it's unusual, but it has happened to me.
Yeah, it used to be a really bad thing with affiliates because they could load a cookie onto people's computers just by landing on a website. And so you had loads of, and that would override, an affiliate cookie would override if we sent out a coupon to you and you used our coupon, the affiliate would still get the sale. And that was a real mess because, And
I want to make it clear, we're not bad-mouthing Udemy. They've been very good to us. It's a great service. They do a lot of reaching out and advertising. But I think we're at the point now where we want to try and reach out to our own students and, get the word out that way. The Go Jam has been very good for, getting our name out there. We're doing pretty good on Facebook. We're doing pretty badly on Twitter. We don't really touch Reddit. And I don't understand TikTok at all.
Yes. I was looking at TikTok earlier. It's very funny. I don't think I can do a short form video for
I don't understand.
That would make any sense.
I mean, I get the format of the video. I don't understand why people are doing this.
I don't know. It's a younger generation thing.
Yeah, no, I am now 2 generations out. Like, I am now officially befuddled middle-aged man looking at this technology going, looks great, don't get it.
Oh, no. You mean I've only got a few years left?
Yeah, well, no, you've got ages. You're like 20.
Yeah, yes, just let me make sure that my balding patch doesn't come through.
Don't even. So yeah, any more questions, thoughts, concerns, interpretive dances, songs, jingles, puppet shows?
We
have to
I've just got an idea for a character.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. Has he got little hand puppets?
Yeah, when he's talking to an NPC, he can talk. This is my friend.
Oh, we are looking at NPCs for the town. We did briefly discuss Dialogic, but I don't think it's that kind of game. So I don't think Dialogic makes a huge amount of sense.
Yes.
And one of the big conversations we keep having is, when do we say, okay, we're using this plugin, and when do we say we'll teach that from scratch?
Yes, there's always a huge gap in knowledge, because if you end up just teaching people how to use other people's plugins or add-ons or whatever you want to call them, then you don't have the fundamental knowledge in order to do something or correct it. So there's a fine art between helping you and hindering you. One of the things that I think is a great thing is the scatter add-on. The fact that, and this is with Blender as well as Godot, it's a different add-on. It's just called scatter, but the ability to just scatter meshes along rather than just placing them manually. You're not learning anything by placing individual meshes everywhere
or a multi-mesh instance. You could do this. It's just
getting a tool to do that for you. That's the thing. I think when an add-on is a tool, it's a good thing. But then again, there are tools that take away a lot of a particular function. Perhaps you want to teach it, perhaps you don't. So we'll see as we go through and actually start fleshing out this in a bit more detail.
Rayus is asking, well, first let's talk about this puppet show and cat theatre and new model for the pack, Punch and Judy stand and a mime artist. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yep. Are you going to be using a state machine? Possibly, probably. I don't know. I'm sort of umming and ahhing about it because I'm still playing with it, and I'll know more once I have our own character to play with. GD Quest's mannequin does have a state machine, and it's very modular. There's a lot you can do with it. But I also want to use an animation tree to blend between animations because I don't like that animations suddenly start and stop. Like, I want that transition.
Well, there's a great example of the current character that we've got in there. When they walk down the stairs, they suddenly start reaching for the sky. It's hilarious to look at, but it's not desirable in the game.
I would show you, but the slideshow won't allow that to happen.
Yeah, it's a very quick animation.
So possibly with State Machine. I think it's likely. I'm just not sure how I'll implement it yet. I'm going to be rewriting all of the character logic from scratch, all of the camera logic from scratch. When we have that character, it's just tabula rasa.
So I think it would be fair to say over the next couple of weeks, we'll be fleshing out more and more of these modules, so you get a better idea, and you'll be able to ask better questions as well, because we will start having these discrete modules all put in place, or asset packs. We're working hard behind the scenes on making sure that they're the right size and the right scope for people.
We
as well.
did have a lovely moment on the second attempt for Mikey's been building and experimenting and throwing away and building, experimenting, throwing away. It's a whole iterative process. But the second attempt at character, where he's like, well, you said big head. I'm like, Mikey, this head is 4 meters wide. It's like, yeah. Mikey, the door is 2 meters wide. What am I supposed to do? Make it a soft body?
Soft body!
And then both of us were just like,
yeah, be careful what you ask for. I'm very much like an angry genie sometimes.
Yeah. There was a whole discussion about we could do a game mechanic where every time you defeat an enemy, your head gets bigger until you can't get out the door.
So there's this, you got to make sure that you don't kill too many enemies, otherwise you won't be able to get back with the loot. But I think that would work as a game mechanic.
It sounds like a good game jam game. I don't think it's a good game for playing.
No. Especially if you put mass to the head, so eventually you just topple over. You end up like a
but you're
turtle
animating
on
that. There's other stuff I've been thinking about, do we put inverse kinematics on the feet so that stairs feel better and slopes feel better?
Ladders.
I mean, ladders is a whole piece of scope creep. We could.
That is why I'm suggesting it now. Now's the time for scope creep, so we can rein it back in.
Or we just don't.
I'll be reeling it back in, but yeah.
Or we just don't put ladders in. We have stairs.
We could just make ramps. It's accessible.
We have stairs. We could put an elevator, a chairlift.
Oh, medieval elevator. I want to make that now with loads of cogs and a counterweight.
Elevators have been around since the Greeks, so sure, go for it. I would take us for a victory lap and jump in the lava pit to keep Roderick happy, but with the slideshow, I don't know that it's that interesting, so I'm not going to.
Oh, perhaps you can record it and then add it
I
as a
can.
video later.
But I haven't.
All right. So, has anybody got any final questions? Because I think we've been going now for just over the hour. We'd like to keep things tight.
So that we can squeeze
So
our
if you
giant
could-
heads through the door.
Exactly.
So yeah. Medieval Stenner stair lift. Yeah. The old Stenner stair lift. I'm saying the old, not ye old, because ye old annoys me.
That's a bit rude.
No, because that's not a Y, that's a
It's
thorn.
a th. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a letter which became two.
There was an
there we go.
Anglo-Saxon letter that was still in use, which was sometimes scribbled a bit like a Y, and then when the printing press came over, there wasn't a thing that looked like a thorn, so they used the Y.
Ye old. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening.
Thank you for coming. We had a lovely time, and thank you for the jelly and the ice cream.
I don't have to. I've got Angel Delight, which is kind of a mousse. I might go make that. Different game.
Can we have a mousse in the game called chocolate?
Do we? Do we really? Although animating quadrupeds would be quite an interesting. I could just go up
to
in
put
legs.
the rideable toucan and the six-legged rhinoceros. And the
Exactly.
flying dragon.
So we've now got the two. We can have like a slug character or a caterpillar. So no, caterpillars have legs, but okay, a slug character, no legs. Oh no, 1 foot, and then a biped, our NPCs. Then we can have
A triped.
a triped, a quadped,
A quintuped.
or quadruped, and then I don't know how a 5-1 will work. Is that just a tail? Is that 4 with a tail?
No, it's
animated tail.
It's a quintuped.
Then we've got a 6-legged rhinoceri. And then we can do arachnids as well. Oh, this is, and then finally, no, octopuses are still 8 legs. That we
Octopods.
can't go any higher than 8. It's impossible. Millipedes don't count.
They can't count.
No.
They have too many legs.
1, 2, 3. 1.
All right, so that feels like a good place to stop that. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Centipede's final decapede.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll keep you posted and keep putting videos up and experimenting and getting this as good as possible. And we'll let you know when the Kickstarter is ready to be shared and bookmarked, and we'll let you know when it launches. And then we're going to be really nervous for a month. So, yeah. I forgot how I do this. Do I press the button?
Yeah, you push the button. I'll just wave frantically. Bye.